In this Blender tutorial, I will show you how to create these two different UV grids in Blender. So we'll be creating this UV grid and also this color UV grid as well. So I've used this UV grid in some of my tutorials, like my tutorial on how to create your own HDRIs in Blender and also how to set up depth of field in Blender. The link's in the description if you'd like to check out those videos. And so I got some comments from people and they were wondering how I created this UV grid, so I thought I would just create a quick video on how to make these. So there's two different places that you can create this. You can create it in Blender shader nodes, or you can also create it right over here in the UV editor. So what you're going to do in the shader nodes is just press Shift A, and you're going to search for an image texture. And I'm just going to drop this down here. Now we need to make a new image texture. So if you want to do it in the UV editor, you can just do it right here by clicking on new, or you can also do it right here. So I'm just going to click on the new button, and then you can create the name. I'm just going to call this UV grid, and then you can change the width and the height. For now, I'm just going to go with the default, which is a 1K texture. Now the color doesn't really matter because we're going to be overriding this. And then right here on the generated type, it's going to be set to blank on default, but you can choose either UV grid or color grid. So I'm first going to do UV grid, and then you can click on OK. So now that we have that, if you just plug the color into the base color of your material, you can now see the UV grid. And you can also just click right up here in the UV editor and you can search for it, and you can see here is the UV grid. So as you can see, it's really easy to create because Blender actually generates it for you. And then let's do the other one. So I'm just going to click over on this material here and I'll press Shift A. And again, I'm going to go to the search and search for an image texture. And then let's click on new. And you can, of course, do this right over here by clicking on new. So this time I'm just going to keep all the settings the same, although I will call this like color grid. And then right over here on the generated type, I'm going to instead change it to color grid. And then I'll click on OK. And then we can just plug the color up to the base color. And then I can also go right here and search for it. And there is the color grid. So as you can see, Blender generates this one as well for you. So I sometimes like to use these textures in my tutorials just because they look pretty cool. You may have also sometimes seen these textures in some game dev or game development videos, or like some game development environments. And I believe they add these textures onto their environments or onto their objects before they apply a texture. And that way they can just look at their object and make sure there isn't any stretching in the UVs. For instance, right here on this monkey head, you can see there is some stretching because that is blown up. But then right over here, the texture is a bit smaller. So right over here, I imported my War Cannon 3D model. I'll have a link to the War Cannon 3D model if you'd like to check that out. But you can see that I've applied this texture to all of these objects. And so I can just see what the UVs are like. So you can see on the main metal piece of the War Cannon, it looks pretty good. And you can also see like where the seams are. So there's a seam right there. But then I can kind of look around and you can see like right here, there's a little bit of stretching. And also you can check for the scale. Like you can see the scale, the UVs are much smaller on the rope. So this can be very useful if you just want to see if there's any stretching in your UVs before you actually apply a material. And so you can correct for that if there is some stretching by just going to the UV editor, and then you can edit your UVs. And then what's really cool about these textures is you don't actually need to save them externally. Now you can if you want to by just clicking on image, and then you can click on save as, and you can save this as a texture, but I actually don't need to. So I'm just going to save this Blender file. I'll just go file and save this. All right, so I closed that Blender file and then I just opened up Blender again, and in my recent files I'm just going to open up the uv.blend, and you can see there are the textures, and I didn't save them externally, but it kept the file data within Blender, so that is super cool. So that is it. That is how you create these UV grids in Blender. So I hope this tutorial was helpful, and thank you for watching.